Welcome to another session on male strategies. I am going to be speaking to a conversation that I started a few days ago, which was titled Body Count. I have since had a number of responses and conversations with different people, and so I decided that I would focus on the men's perspective and provide some very specific male strategies on how to deal with women with HBCs, high body counts. Let me start by using the analogy of a car. Many of you may have noticed or observed that in a lot of my conversations, I tend to think about analogies. I use parables. I use stories where relevant to provide a useful way of understanding the concept, or a useful way of remembering what should be a guiding lesson. To deal with today's session and how men should view women with HBCs, it's important to use a car as a useful analogy. Generally speaking, we all as men, we have cars that we drive, and those who have cars usually have the best car that they can afford. If you walked up to a young man and you said you can have any car that you want, you would find actually that the car he chooses, which would be gifted to him, would be very different to the car he selects if he was going to pay for the car with his money, time, blood, sweat. Generally speaking, a useful analogy would be to say women are like cars, and most men are with the most attractive women that they can afford. Some cars are vintage cars. Some other cars are, high class, high brand, great manufacturing machines, and therefore command very high and attractive prices. Depending on your, ability, you might be able to afford the best of the best. And sometimes you might find as you journey through your life cycle, your ability to afford better cars will increase with age and time, especially as you make yourself valuable to the marketplace, and therefore you receive a compensation that is consistent with the service you provide to the marketplace. Now, women are like cars, and women come in different packages. You have the Aston Martins and the Ferraris, and you have the Rolls Royces, but you also have, the BMWs, the Audis, and I'm talking about the 7 Series BMW or the 5 Series, the new models. You have the Audis and the various models, A5, and all the others that fall within what would be considered the high value range. But you also have reliable cars that could be brand new, but are still on the lower scale, such as the Ford Focus. You have things like the Vauxhall, you have the Toyota Prius. All of these cars have different market values. Certainly, the one car I haven't included there is a Tesla. Irrespective of the model you choose, you're buying a car of great design and styling and technology, and therefore you could say you're part of a club. That is, and those cars cover brand new cars. But you also have used cars. And used cars will come in several manufacturers and several shapes. If you want a car, you have to make a decision. Do you want to buy the car, or do you want to lease the car? About 15 to 20 years ago, we saw a change in how consumers acquired their vehicles. This coincided with the social media breakthrough, where everyone and anyone had a mobile social account. And it was not unusual to see people feeling left out because they couldn't afford to buy cars explicitly. So manufacturers started marketing cars, although the whole leasing dates back to pre the 1950s. But manufacturers saw an opportunity to feed on the need for people to feel important, and therefore to sell them a package where they could simply pay for a certain price, sometimes £299 rather, sometimes £300, and sometimes £200. For something as little as £200 per month, you could drive an attractive car. It would be leased, you wouldn't own it. You would have, for a certain period of time, the benefits of access to the car, but you didn't have the ownership rights to the car. At the end of the period or duration, the car was returned back to the manufacturer or to the dealer. On the opposite side, you had a group of people who, because they could afford cars, would just buy a car outright. Now, women are like cars. As a man, you have a choice to make. You can either buy or you can lease. Now, I know for women who are listening to my words, they might be thinking that I'm suggesting that women can be bought. No, it's the reason why I started with a reference to an analogy. Buying something means you're paying the highest price, believing you're getting the highest value. Leasing something means an equal exchange. You recognize that for what you're able to afford, you have a limited amount of use of what you want. In this case, a car. The dating marketplace and the marriage marketplace have been, in many ways, decentralized and has been deregulated. So much so that what used to be considered as precious, important, divine, to be protected, is now considered as another commodity. Sex has become a commodity that anybody can acquire, sometimes for nothing more than a smile, nothing more than a swipe. And therefore, what men have had to face up to is the realization that back in the day, society expected a man to go out to the world, slay the dragon, bring back some game, and feed that game to a woman's father, a woman's family, in exchange for the opportunity to even court her, let alone even marry her. You had to go out and prove yourself, show that you were worthy of the responsibility. You were supposed to return with something to demonstrate the sacrifices you had made in that period. And with that process, you were allowed to start the conversation. Women were the prize. Women were the most important part of society. And a virgin's sum, or a virgin's prize, was a term used to indicate that you were buying purity, and that you were buying someone who, in this case, you had the opportunity to pair bond with someone who was considered, not just by her family, but by society at large, as being very precious. The feminist movement, the womanist movement, the liberal movement, technology such as the pill, and many more, have created an environment that has taken what was precious and converted it to something that is considered as nothing today. So, in the game of dating, men play a very, very harsh tactics. The rules of the game are set. Like war, to the victor goes all the spoils. Men, therefore, in the dating marketplace, are happy to get the most amount of sex for the least amount of value exchange, in this case money. Women, on the other hand, play a different game, which is to get the most amount of money or whatever derivative of money they want, such as influence, power, wealth, fame, connection. It could be intelligence, it could be entertainment, charisma, love, whatever they can get the most of, but give up the least amount of sex. That means between both parties, it's a war. It's a game of a zero-sum nature. It's not a positive-sum game, as you would find when you get to be in the marriage marketplace. In the dating marketplace, it's a zero-sum game. Now, this brings me back to the whole concept of body count. Body count is no different than a perishable commodity. Let me use a car again as an example. Anybody who understands finance or understands accounting, or anyone who understands economics, will tell you that anything that is perishable and anything for which, whilst being perishable, is easily replaced and is produced in greater quantity on a daily, monthly, or yearly basis, that you will always have a demand-supply puzzle to resolve. And that over time, the more you have the demand sustain, you're going to have the price drop. And if the item is perishable, according to the laws of science and the laws of nature and biology, the value of the said thing will drop over time. So cars depreciate in value the moment you drive a car off the lot. If I walked into an Aston Martin showroom and I bought an Aston Martin DB11 and I drove that car down to, let's say, Chelsea Bridge, I turned the car around and drove back to Sloane Square and said, I do not want this car. I'd like to sell it. I would have lost about 20% of the value, although I would have only have covered no more than about 17, 18 miles. The reason is that cars depreciate in value, and new cars particularly, once they've been used, depreciate much more than older cars that are being resold. So a car that is brand new, used for a year, sold back into the marketplace, even though the usage was very low, could see a 25-30% depreciation in its value. A car that is 8 years old has already gone through its depreciation. Therefore, although it's 8 years old, if it's sold back into the marketplace at year number 9, haven't been acquired at year number 8 by a separate person, what you find is that between year 8 and year 9, you may only see roughly about a 7 to 11% depreciation. 1 year separates both cars. However, the new car depreciates much faster. The same thing applies to a virgin's price. Religion encourages most women to preserve their value until they've decided that they're ready for that union. There are several reasons for this, one of which is the risks that come with the choice you make to go against the grain. So a woman's body count is like a perishable commodity. The more the body count increases, the faster the value of the woman to the marketplace, and specifically to the relationship marketplace, the faster she depreciates as a perishable commodity. Nothing gains value, especially if that item is a commodity. Nothing gains value with time, whilst remaining a perishable item, especially an item for which newer models are being produced on a daily basis. So, for example, we know money, fiat currency, depreciates every day. Now, this year in the UK, the inflation rate at present is roughly 11.5%, 11.3% as of the last announcement. By 11.5% as of today. Now, what that means is that this year alone, the value of the British pound due to inflation has depreciated by 11.5%. Next year, it will depreciate because we keep printing money. The more we print, the more we devalue the British pound. A woman's body applies and works using the same principles. The more she gives of herself freely to the marketplace, to strangers, for which people are exchanging very little for her, the more her value reduces. Now, I should clarify the marketplaces more carefully. The dating marketplace is the first of the two marketplaces where you would normally meet and see men. The marriage marketplace is the second marketplace where you will always find men, but in fewer quantity. Adjusted for location, geography, interests, culture, religion, roughly about 80% of people are in the dating marketplace, the first marketplace. 20% are in the second marketplace. Now, I know most people would say, this is not possible. Most people are married. There are more married people than there are single people. I understand that. But you have to understand that I'm making adjustments for people who, and I'm referring to people who are in the marketplace seeking for value or seeking for transaction. People who have been married for 50 years are no longer in the marketplace. You go to the marketplace, you buy what you want and you leave. At the moment where you walk away from the marketplace, you are no longer in the marketplace. You've achieved what you want. You find more people remain in the dating marketplace because primarily people are looking for short-term benefits. And those who are in the marriage marketplace are fewer because there are less men getting married today than they were 40, 50 years ago. Now, this simply means that in the dating marketplace, let me be very, very clear, a woman's body count matters very, very little. A high body count by a woman in the dating marketplace is something that most men want. There are a number of reasons. I will explain later why it is important and vital to be careful. But in the dating marketplace, men primarily want sex. That's our reason for dating. Dating to men equals sex. We want to have sex. We understand that we want to have sex, but we do not want to pay the price that the people in the marriage marketplace are paying, which is the opportunity to exchange the full price for the full value. Those in the dating marketplace prefer to lease cars. Again, I come back to the car analogy. In any case, whether you are in the marketplace for dating or you are in the marketplace for marriage, it's better for you to lease than to buy. There's so many reasons. I have covered some of these reasons in other videos. But there is nothing and no benefit within marriage that men can obtain, especially men who have no intentions of having children. There are no benefits. As a matter of fact, let me take that back. Even for men who want children, everything can be outsourced for a lower price. The benefits of marriage, the men once used to get: purity, exclusivity, peace, a wife, and children, not just one, no longer exist. You can outsource every benefit you once had within the institution of marriage. You do not have to be married. And therefore, what you're finding is when you juxtapose the lack of net benefits with the costs, both from a societal perspective, the family courts, the divorce laws, the legislative obstacles, the challenges, the quality of the women, men are deciding, I will just remain in the dating marketplace and I'll just keep leasing. I'll lease a car for 1 year and I'll take it back and get another newer model. I'll lease that new model for 2-3 months. I'll take it back to the marketplace and get a better model, because the manufacturers are producing newer models every single day. So, as a man, the game should be to lease, because there is no benefit to you, net benefit for marriage. Now, I'm speaking on the general, in the modern West. Now, what this means is that in the dating marketplace, we want women who have high body counts. The reason is simple: we want to exchange very little. If you have a high body count, to most men, it indicates that you have very high regard for yourself. You have possibly low self-esteem. You possibly have daddy issues. You started your sexual journey very young. It also means the barriers to entry are non-existent. And so for a man in the dating marketplace looking for purely sex and not wanting to stay long enough to see your face in the morning, we want sex on day one. We even want to have sex before we start to date you. We want sex before intimate conversations. We simply want to be able to swipe and have sex. And if the woman is willing to give us something that should be of value to her so freely, in exchange for nothing, more power to you, the woman. So men love and want women with high body counts in the dating marketplace. Now, we take a risk in doing that, some of which I'll go into shortly. In the marriage marketplace, there's a change of expectation. Those who choose to go into that lane are asking themselves a question: cui bono? Who benefits? Do I pay the full price for the car that has been used as a leased car that other people have taken to the tracks, done a few laps, treated very poorly, eroded the brake pads? Do I then pay the full price for the same car, recognizing that the car in question has been used very poorly by others who simply leased the car? It gets very tricky now. So men are saying, no, I'd like to know the mileage on the car. I'd like to know the service history, the ownership record. I'd like to understand what the car was used for. Was it a company car? Was it a leased car? Was it a private car? Was it a family car? Were dogs allowed in the car? Did you smoke in the car? We want all this information. We want to see receipts of maintenance and repairs to ensure that what we are buying and what we exchange for what we buy is fair and equal. Now understand that we're also looking from the perspective that is not zero sum. It's a positive sum relationship. The dating marketplace is a zero sum game. The marriage relationship marketplace is a positive sum game. Both parties have to benefit. But men are simply saying, I have to make sure that I'm exchanging the right quantity in currency, whatever that currency may be, for the right value, which could be, in this case, a car, or the analogy that is represented. So for men, here are some strategies. Knowing what you know thus far, you have to be smart about the game you play. In the dating marketplace, it's always buyer beware. In the marriage marketplace, the emphasis of buyer beware cannot be overstated. I have to tell you, as a man, it gets even more interesting. Now, what this simply means is that if you're in the marriage marketplace, you're playing a very, very different game. And my recommendation has always been the same. 35 should be the age at which you choose to transition from the dating marketplace to the marriage marketplace, primarily because I want you to fulfill your dreams and your goals. I want you to achieve a level of success, both financially, in your work. I want you to discover your purpose and your mission, your calling, your assignment. I would like you to have achieved a level of failure in life to draw out of you that greatness that comes with being a man. I want you to attain a level of manhood where you recognize that life is about suffering. It's not sunshine and rainbows. We tend to take the path of least resistance as men when we fail. You see, when we succeed, we party. When we fail, we tend to ponder. We tend to stop and think. Failure plus introspection or reflection plus corrective actions leads to progress. That equation requires time. I use 5 years as a time period. So from 35, you go 5 years backwards, it's 30. So from 30, you can start thinking about transitioning to the marriage marketplace or the relationship marketplace. Now you have 5 years to fail. By 30, you've achieved your dreams and goals. You've achieved mastery in whatever is your purpose. You've done so without any commitment to a mono relationship. You've done so without reproducing or getting anyone pregnant. And at 30, you're a man. But you're a man without the stripes. You don't have a cape. Superman doesn't have his cape just yet. He needs to go through about 5 years, half the time it takes for you to become a man or attain mastery in your area of interest professionally needs to be dedicated to failing, trying things, start a business, chase a few rabbits in the wild, travel the world, pursuing that calling you have inside you, the calling that may not be available and may not get the attention it needs when you have the responsibility of being a father or a husband. For those reasons, I say to men, stay in the dating marketplace as long as you can, until you're ready. Now, for those of you, and the small group of you who decide to transition into the marriage marketplace, knowing what we know about the modern West and modern women, unfortunately, most are leased cars. There are very few high quality, high ranking, prestigious, pristine cars on the market and cars available for sale. Similarly, what we found is that women have been allowed and rightly so, to make that choice. However, I always say, and this applies to you, the men, as well, choices come, and your choices will come with costs. Your choices will come with constraints. They will come with consequences, and they will come with trade-offs. There are no solutions in this life we have. There are only trade-offs. So whether you are a man making a decision in the dating marketplace, you're making a choice. Whether you are a man in the marriage marketplace, you are making a choice. So here are some choices I will put before you respectfully. Many days ago, I was speaking with a loved one, and I said, I would hate to be a young man in the dating marketplace or in the marriage marketplace today. I would hate to be there because it's not what it used to be. I hate to say this. The level of depreciation and deterioration, dilapidation that has befallen modern Western women is incredible. You know, like the prophet said, I searched around and I couldn't find one. I could not find one good one. That's the feeling. Now, sometimes perception triumphs reality, but that's the perception and the observation I make when I interact with people, and I see and I look through and I listen. Now, this simply means that as a man in the marriage marketplace, a woman who has a high body count should be disqualified from the process of you courting a woman completely. Controversial? Absolutely. Necessary? 100%. The reason is simple. We courted women for their purity, for their chastity, for their reservation, for their family values, family virtues, for the decorum, femininity, all the various things that were given to a woman at a young age. We courted women because they were reproductively fertile, young, youthful, fun to be around, pleasurable, and could be like muses around us. We went through the process of courting for the price. Today, what you have is no different from cars that have been used for 10, 15 years. They've got a paint job, same engine, brake pads have not been changed. The transmission is still the same, just as bad as it was many years ago. And we're being asked to pay the full price for the same car. Women with high body counts are disqualified from the process of courting them. Now, to each their own. That is my perspective. Why? Because it means that you've disqualified yourself from the opportunity to be treated like a virgin would be treated. The idea that we should, and women should expect to treat virgins and put a price on virgins that is similar to what they put on a woman who has been on the streets, in the marketplace, with a significant body count is mind-blowing. I do not subscribe to that. I do not recommend it. I would simply say to men, avoid it. Why pay full price when you can rent? Courting is the start process or the initial process of paying full price. We do not pay full price for a specific reason, because the packaging has been tampered with, the label has been ripped off, the product has been used not once, not twice, not 100 times, but it's been used a number of times. The remnants of the products that have been returned back to the packaging has now come with baggage, issues, emotional, mental, psychological, physical, and therefore, by choice, that product has disqualified itself from the opportunity to be courted. That's the first. Now the second timing couldn't be worse. The second item of note is the importance as a man to be aware of not falling for the all too recent mistake of choosing someone with a HBC for a spouse. It's important to, where possible, avoid the temptation, despite the packaging, despite the glitz and the glamour, despite what might be seen as the external hardware, to disavow the temptation to choose as a spouse for marriage, for commitment, a woman with a HBC. Now, a HBC obviously is a subjective term. There are several variations of what could be considered high. Think about it like a spectrum. I provide my own personal calculation of how to consider what could be seen as a range of acceptability, a range of normality, and range of exceptional promiscuity. I use a good example, which is simply as follows. In the UK, the age of consent is 16 years. The age of consent served as a marker. At that point in time, the government, the state, the legislature agree that the person or the said people are of age and are capable of making a decision about their sexual choices. If you want to drive a car in the UK, you need to be 17 years. Yes, you can apply for a provisional driver's license a few months before your 17th birthday, 16 years and 6 months, 16 years and 9 months. You can apply for a provisional license. However, to be legally able to drive, you need to be 17. To drink, there is a minimum legal age. And what we find in the UK is if you look at all three of those responsibilities, or those freedoms which come with responsibilities, the sexual aspect is the most important, because it's the one that carries the most important responsibility, and it's the one with the highest level of unintended consequences. Therefore, I use 18 years as my benchmark. Not because I'm trying to be difficult, but because it's important to understand that you need to be an adult, aware of the choices you're making, aware of the costs of said choices, aware of the consequences of getting it wrong, aware of the constraints that will come from the path you choose, and therefore aware of the trade-offs you're making. And at 16, most people are still very, very inexperienced, still young. They haven't developed their intellectual faculties of knowing how to reason and think deductively and inductively. So I use 18. And so the formula that I suggest or recommend to people is as follows. For a woman, your age, less 18 years, will give you a number. That number has to be divided by 2. And what you get as the result should be what would be the tolerance level of acceptability of your body count. Now, some people prefer to simply take the age of consent and subtract the age of consent, in my case 18 years, from their age. So if you are 28, to make it more concrete, 28 less 18 is 10. Some people say, well, that means I can have a body count of 10 years, of 10 rather. I have a problem with that because it means in 10 years, you've had 10 different individual sexual partners. That just seems too high, in my opinion, especially considering that the early days or early start of your sexual journey needs to also be a period where you're more reserved, more careful, quite young and naive, though still believing in love. And it's not unusual to meet people who date the same person for 3-4 years. So the first 3 to 4 years of your dating life as a woman, your body count needs to be much lower than the latter part of your life when you have the opportunity to make other choices. So I like to take the difference between your age and 18 years and divide by 2. In which case, if you did that, it would be 5. So if you're 28, your body count should be about 5. If you're 38, 38 less 18 is 20, which would mean if you divide 20 by 2 is 10. That is within the range of acceptability. Now, if you are above 10, there's a range of tolerance still there. 12, 13. It's not unusual because you may have started your journey at 16 rather than 18. And you may have had some bad experiences and thrown yourself in good faith and peaceably into love and hoping to meet someone that you will call the one. Maybe you've had, made poor choices and had bad experiences with men. And so a range of about 20%, plus or minus, is not seen as extraordinarily restrictive. So at 38, you have 10 partners, plus 20%. So that could go up to, say, 12 partners. But you want it to be between, ideally, the tolerance level of minus 20 to plus 20. So you're looking at roughly between 8 and 12 partners at 38. Those who have much higher numbers, especially numbers exceeding 20, there's much to answer for. I know we always look back and say we made mistakes. But what that suggests is that you've had opportunities in life and you've made choices. And you have to live with those consequences. Now, as a man, think about this. And if you're a woman, think about this from a man's perspective. Assuming that you cannot do that, you cannot get yourself to reason from the perspective of a man. Then let me ask a question. Do this on behalf of a son that you might have, or you hope to have, a brother. And think about if you were making a decision for them, and your son has come to the age when he's trying to select a woman to settle down with, to pay and to give and accept the highest honor a woman can give a man, and him in exchange provide the highest honor. And your son says to you that, I've met a woman, she's very kind, she's very loving, she's very sweet. And the mother, wise as you are, say, well, what is a history of cooperating with men? And you say, well, I don't have a lot to share. She has not really had success in dating and in relationships. But Mum, from what I know, from what she said, she has had 120 partners, sexual partners. And she's only 27 years old. Or to make it even more simple, she's 27 going on 28 in a few months. So you do the same calculation. 28 less 18 is 10, divided by 2 is 5. She would have been permitted to have a tolerance range of 20%, so it could go up from 5 and go up to 6, but it could start from about 4. So 4 to 6 would have been what would have been acceptable as a range of normalcy, what is expected. Let's use the top range of 6. If she has 120 partners, or she's had 120 bodies, then she's way above the range of tolerance. As a mother, I'm sure you would say, son, she might be a great girl, but she has not shown sexual discretion in the past. And for you to expect her to show sexual discretion in the future will be a fool's game. Secondly, you're looking based on the outside. You haven't done all the tests and checks and made sure that there are no complications, both physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. You're choosing someone who has been unequally yoked with so many more people. I love you, son, but I would recommend you do something different. And you might say in your naivety, Mum, it doesn't really matter. Now, I know you as a mother will remember the saying, if it looks like a duck, and if he quacks like a duck, and if he moves like a duck, it has to be a duck. Now, I am very much for second chances. I don't believe that people should be denied the opportunity to start anew. I would just hope that I'm not paying the full price for that opportunity. We leave that to those who can give us our salvation. You, the woman, may have come to your Damascus moment. Maybe you've transformed from Saul to Paul. You're different, you're new. However, there's a condition that you must satisfy, which is the reason why I say avoid marrying people with HBCs. That condition is simple. Like Paul, you have to go through the process of proclaiming, making a declaration. In the words of Paul, he says, the things I once loved, I now hate. The things I used to hate, I now love. People can use words. Paul demonstrated with his actions, and he demonstrated with his life. So much so that at the end he said, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race, and I kept the faith. In sexual dynamics, especially amongst modern women, I can tell you this, chains of habits are too light to be felt until they become too heavy to be broken. Many people profess as to why they are new people, why their whole phase is behind them, why they're ready to settle down and be committed. Habits are difficult to break. Behavior becomes habitual. And I can predict within some level of precision your future if I watch and I look at your daily habits. Your daily habits and your routines are the golden pathway to the life you will have in the future. Except you change something. Now, people say they have changed. My only issue and my hope for you, the man, is that you're not the one being experimented on for that change to be demonstrated. And so, 2 very simple recommendations. You shouldn't court women with high body counts because they've disqualified themselves by their actions from the virtue of being courted. Number 2, you should not consider for marriage those with excessive body counts. Now let me go into perhaps an explanation very quickly on the 2 marketplaces and why I am suggesting that you keep, I like the saying, give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God what is God's. Give to the dating marketplace what is the dating marketplace, and the relationship or marriage marketplace do likewise. There are risks associated with both marketplaces when you're dealing with people with high body counts. Now, a lot of the things I have said so far, whilst targeted towards strategies for men, the same principles apply for women. the garment the person is wearing can be altered, male or female. These principles apply to both sexes. I'm speaking to men in this particular instance, but the principles will work. In the dating marketplace, there are a number of issues that you face if you are a man, and you've made a decision to expose yourself to the risk and to the pleasure and the excitement with a woman with a high body count. The first is the risk of pregnancy. The fact that things could go wrong. The fact that it could get too exciting. Something goes wrong. As men, we only have one form of birth control that really works other than what could be a permanent surgery. Using condoms is what most men use. Most men do not get a vasectomy, and we don't snip ourselves because we recognize in the short term what we want may be different from what we decide that we want in the long term. So we use condoms. It's also not the most effective form of birth control. It breaks, things happen. And so the risk of pregnancy is something you have to accept. If you deal with a woman with a high body count, you risk getting her pregnant. Women have more than 20 forms of birth control. And a woman is the only person who can actually decide to bring a life to term. A man doesn't have the right. The moment the sperm leaves your body, you lose the rights over that sperm. Especially if that sperm is now within what I call the vessel of the woman. Women are gatekeepers to their bodies, their emotions, and their womb. They make the calls. When it's in our body, we can decide. We can decide to give it to a sperm bank, or we can decide to give it indiscriminately. If you do so with a woman with a high body count, you risk getting her pregnant. Number two, you risk the infections that come with sex, STIs and STDs. The higher the body count of a woman, all things remaining equal, and the higher the body count of a man, the higher the likelihood that you have encountered, will have a sexually transmitted disease. It's just a fact. It's a probability equation. You don't have to think. This is not a cause for thinking deeply. It's a numbers game. The more you expose yourself to more people, it's something called the law of large numbers. The more you expose yourself to more people, the higher the probability and the risk that one of those said people will have a sexually transmitted disease, or that you might give to one of those people a sexually transmitted disease. Now, number three is you risk fatherhood too soon. Now, in the dating marketplace, men simply want sex. I've never met a man for whom I asked the question, I know you want sex, but if she gets pregnant, would you keep the baby? 99.9% of the time, all men say, no, I just want sex. The risk, therefore, is that you might find yourself caught in the crossroads between what you desire, the 10 minutes of ejaculation, and 18 years of pain. Remember, your sperm is an annuity. It's simply a payment. I wish men could understand this. Most men get sex for nothing. What you produce as part of the sexual encounter is sperm. Deposited in the wrong place, it becomes an annuity, like you've deposited money in a bank. When you deposit money in a bank, the money accrues over time. It takes a while before the money multiplies and multiplies. In the same way, sperm is no different from cash. It's simply an annuity. For 18 years, especially if this is a woman you want nothing to do with from a relational perspective, and if she decides to keep the child, for 18 years, you will make 216 monthly payments. Now, in the UK, you get to pay 10% of your after-tax salary. The average person in the UK earns about 30,000. after tax. So let's call it £300 per month. £300 per month, every month, for 18 years. If you've taken that money instead and put it in a bank account, rather in an investment account, an index fund, accruing, let's say maybe 10% per annum, in 18 years you'll be worth close to about £250,000. That's how much your sperm is worth. Get it right, you can make yourself a millionaire if you let the money remain for another 10, 15 years, beyond 18 years. Get it wrong, not only do you sacrifice your dreams, your goals, your purpose, your future that you've created. It's very important. Sex with people who have high HBCs is not to be taken lightly. So my recommendation is always make sure you're strapped up, and double strapped up if you have to. And check, make sure. Women lie about taking the pill, and women will continue to lie to get what they want. Do not trust the enemy. And anything that has the probability of stealing your dreams, stealing your goals, stealing your future is the enemy. The enemy does not always come with fists, ready for a fight. The enemy does not always come with knives and chains and guns. The enemy sometimes is you, the person within you who is ready to sabotage all of that greatness for a few minutes of ejaculation. Now, number two, in the marriage marketplace, the risks are different. What are the reasons I recommend that you avoid women with high body count? It's simply because it's important to note that those with high body count, the studies have been done to suggest that there's a higher risk of divorce if you get married. There is a much more difficulty in pair bonding with someone, because someone who's had 120 partners has bonded with each and every one of them emotionally and spiritually, physically, so that when they find one person who they want to settle down with, sometimes it's a challenge. It's like the snapback effect. You tend to find those who you choose for such long-term commitments, if they have high body counts, generally have daddy issues. Fundamentally, people who have very high body counts have very little sense of self-worth, self-esteem, self-concept, or lack of self-identity. The idea that you can give yourself randomly to all of these men fundamentally means that there is something inherently wrong somewhere. Daddy wasn't around. Daddy wasn't there to give you love, or showed you too much love. Your first play with men may have been foreplay rather than play or rough and tumble play. And so you've struggled as a woman. So people with high body counts always have family issues, broken focus, challenges in life, especially in the relationship, lack of being satiable, struggle with connection emotionally, spiritually, physically. The bottom line of all of this is to simply say, in conclusion, those with high body count are simply for fun, recreational use, leisure, excitement, but you want to avoid giving your last name to such people. Wish them well, lease the cars if you have to, but unpaid full price. Avoid paying full price. In the long run, it will certainly save your bacon. I understand that there are people who out there who are saying, well, does that mean there is no hope? For those of us who are already in that category, well, it all depends on what you define as high. I'll let you decide. But generally speaking, anyone who gets into the 3 digits, that is just, that's for the angels. Anyone who, in my opinion, exceeds 20, especially if you're below 27, 28, particularly if you're below 28 and you have a body count of 20, that would be seen as slightly high. So, to each their own. Be wise as a man. Recognize your value. Recognize what you're exchanging for your value. Don't be tempted by the excitement of the pee. Don't be fooled by the lust that you have and the desires you have to ejaculate, that you piss down the drain your entire future. You want peace if you're going into the marriage marketplace. You want peace. If there is any hint that there could be issues, and you have to judge from the past. I say this a lot. Some people think we shouldn't be judging them based on the mistakes or decisions they made in their past. That is wrong. There's a saying, if you don't understand history, you're bound to repeat it. And those who do not understand and study history in the past go through life like children, not being aware that things that never happened in their lifetime happened before, and acting like fools. You should judge people based on their past because those are decisions they've made. Now, does it mean you should not forgive them, love them, pray for them, provide support if they need it? You can do all of that without necessarily giving yourself to that person or those people. The responsibility of manhood has to be taken very, very seriously. And I hope it will in your case.